Well, hello and welcome to this, the latest of our series of interviews, where we take the opportunity of talking with eminent people within the Fuellers Company. Today, I speak with Dame Fiona Woolf, who, as everybody knows, is a past Lord Mayor of London and a prominent member of our company. Hello, Dame Fiona. It's good to see you again, and welcome to this Fuellers interview. I'm sure that we are going to have a most enjoyable time over the next half an hour or so.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very honoured. I would have missed the Fuellers more if they hadn't been so active on my screen with all sorts of delightful things, and also in my inbox. So thank you to everybody for keeping the Fuellers fun going, as well as the Fuellers interest and the conversations that we all so much enjoy.
Dame Fiona, when you sent your CV through to me, I have never seen such an impressive document. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. You've been so busy in so many areas for a very long time now.
Yes, I think it's long because I've been doing it for a long time. But yes, I've been tied up with electricity industry reforms since 1988 or so, which is probably before some of the Fuellers, Liveryman and Freeman were even born. That's why it's rather long list, one way or another.
Of course. And when did you start getting involved with the electrical industry?
Well, it was in 1987 as a result of a connection that I had with the Electricity Council from probably 10 years before, when I did some work, would you believe it, on batteries. They
really?
had a joint venture with Chloride on what they call load leveling batteries. And one of the in-house lawyers, the Electricity Council, recommended me to Northern Ireland Electricity.
Yes.
Who were trying to see off a private sector, an independent power project, because they wanted to build the next tranche of generation themselves. And if I tell you that project would have been lignite fired, bearing in mind this is before Kyoto, can you imagine that? So they wanted me to prove that there was no way I could write a power purchase agreement with an independent power producer that would incentivize the independent generator to follow their dispatch instructions and provide ancillary services. Anyway, you're glad to know I actually failed in that endeavor. And we figured out a way to write a contract that would certainly make it rather expensive if they didn't do that, put it that way. And so anyway, one evening over dinner, I mean, the power of being a lawyer is that people don't expect you to know much. If you're an engineer or an economist, they don't expect lawyers to know much. And so you can ask dumb questions. And my question was, so why is this economic? And they said, well, we don't know really, because they haven't done the geology on the mine slope. So I said, well, when the time comes, perhaps it'd be good to ask. Anyway, it turned out it wasn't going to be economic, but I was given credit for having seen the project off. But in the course of that period, they sat me down for about 3 months in the control room in Belfast, in Castlereagh House, and taught me power system operation. I have to say, I think I thought it was kind of a constant driven by the laws of physics. How long was on that? But I became the only lawyer in private practice who'd been trained in power system operations at that point. When the time came for the publication of the white paper for the restructuring of the electricity industry in England and Wales, I was given the opportunity, again through the same people in the Electricity Council, to meet David Jeffries, who was the first chairman of the National Grid. And it was through him that I was appointed to lead the legal team for I like to think I was one of the midwives to the National Grid.
Really?
In between 1988 and
yes.
1990, where you could ask any number of dumb questions because it had never been done before and nobody expected you to know the answer.
Yes, it was. It was a very, very interesting time, and yes, I did know one or two people who were a little bit involved during that period. But that was a huge project.
It was, and actually there were huge numbers of us involved, and in many ways, we all actually created friendships and collaborations which are still so valuable, more than 30 years later, because that one of the truths of electricity restructuring is it's not easy to get it right first time, and in any event, the demands on the system, the demands of the industry keep changing, and of course,
yes.
We didn't know until the mid-90s that we were looking at decarbonisation as well as security of supply and affordability.
Indeed, indeed. But you were whizzing around the world at that time because I believe that you had gold cards with 3 separate airlines. You must have been doing some serious international traveling during this period.
Yes, indeed. I was very fortunate to marry Nicholas in 1990, who we'd met on an oil deal actually some years before. And he took me on a business trip to the US, where I met a number of his energy partners, and he dropped me off in Washington on the way back, where I found my way into the World Bank. And so in the course of the 90s, I found myself with a double practice of reforms in developed electricity systems, some of them in the US, some in Europe, but also a very fascinating developing country world where really the agenda was somewhat different. It was less about implementing competitive markets and more about just increasing the amount of available electricity for unmet need purposes, which was holding economic development back, but also desperately needing to improve the efficiency of the incumbent, usually state-owned utility. I mean,
yes.
I went to India 28 times or something like that in the 90s.
Good gracious.
Where one of the state electricity boards literally didn't know what was happening to 52% of its electricity and therefore its revenues.
That's extraordinary.
You learn a lot that way. You learn a lot at the distribution end of things, which is where the rubber hits the road. So it was very satisfying work, and it was great for my young team because they loved the travel, they loved the sort of backpacking element of it, but also, their young skills could add value more quickly than perhaps, consulting to PJM in the US, or doing a big reform in for the whole of a country.
And what would you say were some of your notable successes, and perhaps one or two things that didn't go quite so well?
Well, talking about India, one of the stories I love to tell, and I actually have the National Grid to thank for that, because they let me borrow a couple of system operators, but they came into the state of Orissa. It's one of the poorest in India, where there were about between 25 and 30 interruptions a day, and basically the operators would turn the machines on in the morning, and they usually fell off the bars at some point or another, and they had to put them back on again.
Yes.
Or transformers would blow up, and then it would maybe took a year to order another one, and so they were constrained in how they could deal with the power flows. And so one evening we're in the, sorry, just to back up on that. So I borrowed a couple of people from the National Grid, bless them, they were not paid well at all to do this. And they taught the system operators essentially the basics of scheduling and dispatch. And in fact, somewhere here, I have the original, let me just get it, the original very first schedule that was put in, that they did for them, which is handwritten in pencil.
Yes.
Not computerized at all, and so they started this training. But one evening in the hotel, we were in the barn. The lights went out as they did, and the diesel generator that the hotel had picked up, as it usually did. And one of my juniors said, it'd be great if the diesel generator could pick up before an interruption rather than after it. And we fell about laughing and ordered another beer. And one of the guys from the National Grid said, what a good idea. Why don't we try that? So we essentially contacted all the big users that had their own diesel generators, got them to respond to an instruction to turn the diesels on at a critical point when because they'd also learnt better demand forecasting just before a system peak. And we reduced the number of interruptions per day from something like 28 to 8. And in the course of that, we managed to regularize the metering of these guys. Quite a lot of the meters had been broken and not fixed, or had been tampered with, or whatever, which actually impeded our ability to go and have dinner in other hotels somewhat, because they're a bit cross with us. But you could make a difference, and I often tell young people that it was a young person who came up with this bright idea. I think more recently, the reforms that we put in place under the previous administration in Mexico had the result of attracting a lot of interest and really competitive bids in long-term auctions for renewable capacity. Mexico has wonderful natural capital to exploit, and some pretty competitive financing with that. And so that was a great result for us, having written the auction rules.
Yes.
But actually, sadly, the next administration didn't buy into those reforms at all, and have unpicked the stitches that we put in place there. But I guess that the biggest thing I'm not proud of is we were not able to implement the sort of reforms in the first stage in California that we had all hoped to achieve. Very big, complex system, very interconnected to the north, and it wound up with. I mean, if you put in place legislation around this, which we had to work within, we had no influence on that, where the distributors have to buy in three different competitive markets, where you could game the rules by withdrawing capacity in one and knowing that you could sell in another, and not allowing them to flex their prices to reflect their costs. So they had fixed costs there. It wound up in all sorts of nonsense in terms of interruptions. PG&E went into insolvency. and it was that period of time was not a happy one for me and my team. I mean, we'd been hired because essentially we were only people who'd done it before and didn't have a conflict of interest. I could keep you here all day with stories because I've been doing this for a long time. So why don't you move on to something, something else?
Tell me, were you able to bring your expertise in the electrical industry into your year as Lord Mayor? Did you find that your background was beneficial during your year?
Well, do you know, it was funny because I was a bit different as a Lord Mayor, being, well, not just female, only the second in 825 years.
Yes.
But essentially being a lawyer with such a technical practice one way and another. And I really was very driven by a sustainability and climate change agenda, because that was essentially, you know, we were at the three objectives of affordability, security of supply, and decarbonisation, of course. And I could see the implications. I got the investing, the sustainable investment community around me. And the Guildhall establishment weren't quite sure if that was the right thing for me to focus on, because we were still in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, and financial regulation was an important one, and the world was on top of that. Anyway, I get to Taiwan, meet the president of Taiwan. I have half an hour with him. I have quite a long list of asks for the foreign banks in Taiwan. After about 10 or 15 minutes of this, because you have to know how to use your time efficiently, the president says, look, okay, I hear what you say about financial services regulation. We'll get on top of that. Can we talk about, I've only got 15 minutes with you left, can we talk about why it is that the UK looks like a test bed for every technological solution in the electricity industry? I see from your CV, that's what you do for a living. So I was still there 3/4 of an hour later.
Wow,
that's impressive. The issue for them was they had built a nuclear plant, but because of Fukushima, they were getting quite a lot of political and social pushback on commissioning it. And so as we came out, the equivalent of our ambassador there, they don't call you an ambassador in Taiwan, said, oh, I've got someone coming in to speak to Thai Power tomorrow. Actually, we're picking him up from the airport tonight. It turned out to be one of my partners, Robert Lane. There aren't, as I said, there aren't very many of us who do this stuff one way and another. When I went as Lord Mayor to Mexico, I had a breakfast with the finance minister who, again, I'd got a list of things for him. And he sat down at breakfast. He said, right, he said, as they're bringing the food in, he said, whatever you want to talk about on financial services, I'll make time for your people to meet mine. But what I want to talk to you about is reforms of the electricity industry. And about halfway through, he said, right, he said, we'd like to hire you. And I said, but you can't. I said, I'm tied up until November on this job. Actually, in what had happened before that just shows the power of the Mansion House. When the president, Peña Nieto, was elected, he came with his transition team before taking office. The FCO directed him to the Mansion House, or probably the ambassadors directed him to the Mansion House. The Mansion House asked me to host a lunch for him. I found out myself sitting next to the aforementioned finance minister, didn't know who he was. And he hadn't, I think, been appointed finance minister at the time. And I said, we've worked before in Mexico. We've nearly got all the paperwork that you need to implement a market there. This was well designed with economists. And you own the papers. I'm sitting on them, but you own them. You're the economic owners of this. I sent him an email with a list of them after that. But at that meeting, at that lunch, he said, "We do not plan to reform the electricity industry. We will reform the oil industry." Anyway, he thought about it after that. Anyway, that is history, but it shows the convening power of the Mansion House. We brought together all sorts of wonderful people to meet him. And going into the mayoralty, I thought we could convene all sorts of people who maybe are talking past each other or don't have the opportunity to meet on the sustainability and climate change agenda. And we did just that. And it was a terrific year. Gosh, it's such a privilege to do that job.
Yes, yes. Before we go further into that, have you found over the years that you've been able to use your expertise with individual livery companies as well, in respect of helping them with their respective objectives?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I've been master 3 times already now, but in many ways it's because maybe I'm just known through having been Lord Mayor to a lot of people. I've got to the stage where when people ask me to speak, I'll either speak on sustainability, climate change, and decarbonisation of the future of the energy industry as I would like to see it. Or I'll speak on diversity and inclusion, but anything else that, I haven't got time for it. There's just so much to do. But, there are so many aspects of it at the moment that we need to bring together. So, Alison Gowman, who's now our sheriff-elect,
indeed,
has a livery climate action group together, and Avril MacDonald, one of our lovely past masters,
deputy master,
our deputy master, is part of that, and has got terrific Avril type ideas about all sorts of different ways of communicating using convening powers, myth busting. She loves doing that. She's so good at it and so articulate that I feel very inspired right now with all that's going on. And Alison has been on the same agenda as me since, way before my mayoralty, when we both sat on something called a Sustainability Working Group. I don't know, 2009, 10, something like that.
Yeah, so it's a long time
ago. Our time has come. Keep plugging away. Don't give up on it.
Absolutely.
I think the Paris Agreement made a lot of difference, but also just the excitement that we have in the run up to COP26.
Agreed.
Which is terrific. But thank you to the fuelers for being there on all this, because they're showing leadership in such an energetic and it's thoughtful, but it's also fun. We can have a bit of fun with it. I don't think climate change is about hair shirts anymore.
No, I'm sure you're right. And talking about having fun, did you enjoy your year as Lord Mayor? Do you have any highlights or stories that might be of interest?
Well, the truth is, you can do anything with staff. And I had something like 5 program managers, 3 diary secretaries, 2 speech writers, a researcher, and a private secretary. So that made it so much of a privilege, but so much easier than it might have. To begin with, you feel as if you're on cobbles, running down a steep slope on roller skates. And you're doing about 3 speeches a day and maybe 7 or 8 different engagements a day. I mean, I remember in Shanghai, I did 8 speeches to different audiences on different subjects in a single day.
That's huge.
So, as you were going from one meeting to another, you got papers on your lap, thinking, now what am I on? But actually being a lawyer it enables you to take a brief pretty quickly
Yes.
and jump onto the salient points. And also I'd known from my day job with particularly with the World Bank, when you've got a half an hour slot with a finance or an energy minister, you have to hit the ground running and get in there straight away. I mean, at the beginning, when you turn up, you've got something, a briefing that says no speech required. And they say to you, Lord Mayor, would you like to say a few words? And you say, no, I don't think so. I can't think of a thing. By the end of the year, you've been invited to something and you're thinking, so why don't these guys want me to speak?
Yes.
Would you like me to say a few words? I went to Nicaragua with one of our charities, Rally International. They made me climb up a very dusty and rather hot volcano and then run down the other side of it with these young people. Nicholas was able to run down faster than I could. I rather walked sedately, thinking I could fall on my nose. We got in. He said, right, I am prepared to bet that when she comes down, she will make a speech. And I was so inspired by all this, and I thought, this is my moment to promote international development to these 30 young people who've come up this with me. And so I opened my mouth and they all fell about laughing. And I thought, what's this about? What's so funny? But yes, I mean, and variety is the spice of life. I guess what I'm pleased about is that the program that I started on diversity inclusion is still running. I called it the power of diversity. I mean, everything in my life is about power and transformers and all these puns on engineering terms. It's now called the power of inclusion, and it's moved on, but it's still running, and I'm grateful to the ongoing team of the Lord Mayor's Appeal. That was another thing that we started with sadly with Sir Roger Gifford, who was such a loss to us all, not the least on green finance. But yes, they have done a marvelous job in growing and sustaining the engagement of the city in the charity work that's led by the Lord Mayors on a continuous basis now, rather than just on a pop-up year by year.
Which direction would you like to see livery companies developing in the 2020s? I mean, it is a changing world, as you mentioned, diversity and many other things going on. But what do you feel are some of the key elements that we should be identifying and responding to?
Well, I suppose that the livery have been pretty sensitive over the last few years about what's happening in society and where they can make a difference.
Yes.
And I think that we wouldn't survive or have survived. I mean, the wax chandlers are coming up for 650th anniversary this year, and it's by no means the oldest, but we wouldn't be here if we didn't continually focus on what makes us modern and relevant. And it's not just about attracting members, because members want to join livery companies because they do stuff that they think is valuable, and they want to be part of what they do. I'm a fan of making projects that, or activities that the rank and file livery can get involved with. Otherwise, it's just all you've got is committees and the court. But there are so many lovely ways in which through our education and award schemes, we can promote young people, whether they're from disadvantaged backgrounds or within the schools we support. And I think we always need to look at the way in which we engage and do our stuff, to see whether we can make it more modern and relevant. I mean, the big benefit of COVID is we've all learnt how to Zoom. All our young have Zoom classrooms now. We have lovely affiliations with the cadets and the reservists and what have you. We can engage with our reservists actually, on board their ships or at their camps or whatever, through this technology.
Yes.
So why don't we do what one or two of the livery companies were showing me when I was Lord Mayor, and having their young people in schools or in cadets presenting to them rather than us going to talk to, or might I say at, them. I mean, I don't know that the young need to be told about the nuts and bolts of climate change. They all know it, and it's their future rather than ours. So why not have them talk to us and have a proper discussion with them, and get them to use their presentation skills to us using this technology. It doesn't involve, in the case of one of the liaisons I have, my getting on a bus at London Bridge and going down to way beyond Dulwich to find the TA centre where they meet. So I think we also, could be doing more with less. I know that Monday night the Livery Climate Action Group was doing an event on food. Now, food-related livery companies have got a lot that they could be doing and showing leadership to us. So I think sustainability in all its forms, the construction-related livery companies are onto heat and buildings. I mean, the heating agenda is huge.
It is.
We, for our part, the energy-related livery companies, of which there are a fair few, have got some really big issues to deal with integration of the different forms of energy for different purposes and the infrastructure that goes with that. So all of it is just forward thinking. I think that livery companies have spotted that they need to look at what's happening ahead rather than driving in the traditional rear view mirror. And there's more to be done. Fellowship is lovely, and we're all missing the dinners and the fun we have with our personal contacts. But I think we want to do more than just that.
I agree.
We don't just, because otherwise, a new member, what does he get? He or she get just an invitation from the clerk to buy a ticket for dinner. I think we all want to do more than that, and I think that's really why livery companies are special. And I mean, what they do through their charities is extraordinary. But again, we could run the ruler over and say, are we doing the right thing? Are we measuring impacts and outcomes in the right way? Are we choosing doing this short term or long term? How do charities want to engage? I'm hoping to get some professional help with that through the business school, the City Business School, which has changed its name from the CAS.
Yes.
Which has a charity for, a centre for charity effectiveness that's working with a number of livery companies on that. So lots to do, lots of forward-facing things. But as I say, we can have a lot of fun with it. It's not a question of putting a hair shirt on. And on diversity inclusion, it's the same.
Absolutely.
I don't mean to put diversity and inclusion into a back seat by comparison to climate change and sustainability. Don't get me wrong. The fact of the matter is that a lot of the livery companies have signed on to a diversity charter, which is all their own. They've thought about this.
Fuelers have done that as well.
Yes, and well, with Avril McDonald, you had no choice, let's face it. She's out there in the world as a force for good.
Absolutely. Tell me, what are your thoughts about COP26? What would you like to see on the agenda, and how do you feel it might progress at the end of the year?
Well, I mean, without really wanting to get bogged down in the politics, I do think it would be great if we could get the countries that are big emitters. I am thinking of India, China, and Brazil, on board with this, and to increase their commitments. What I think the COP will do is to engender more collaboration. It also has already had, and indeed there's a Green Finance Summit this afternoon, which I can't attend because I've got a board meeting at the Science Museum on green finance. The fact of the matter is that I think we need people to believe that they can do it, that through collaboration we can achieve it. I mean, it goes back to Nick Stern's great report, which is over 10 years old now, which essentially says that we have to invest for economic growth anyway. If we do this in a way that's green, and the same applies to diversity and inclusion, if we do this investment in a way that is inclusive, the way that is clean and green, as I like to say, it won't cost much more, but we have to do it anyway.
Yes.
So that is that's really what I think I would like to see come out of it. In the same way as the spirits were rose up after Paris. I'm hoping after Glasgow that there'll be a real energy behind this.
Absolutely. Fiona, is there anything else that you would like to talk about before we conclude?
Well, I would like to say thank you to the Fuelers for reaching out to me. I mean, they come from a proud background in coal and oil, and then maybe Paul Cuttle brought the world of electricity into view. He was always there, I suspect, and it always was in view, but it has such a key role to play, and I may be biased, but I did want to say that it has a unique role to play in terms of our understanding of the role that oil companies and mining companies have in this agenda. They're not to be vilified. They are part of the solution. We need their investment in clean technologies. They're going to be with us in a diversified form, whatever happens. And some of them will have to continue to at least provide some gas that maybe we can mix with some hydrogen to make it cleaner.
Yes.
So this is, I think, where I think the fuelers have a very special role to play amongst the livery, and as I say, thank you to everybody for reaching out to me and inviting me to become an honorary liveryman. I couldn't enjoy it more. In the words of Mary Archer, our chairman of the Science Museum, who is also a fellow honorary liveryman of the fuelers.
Yes, well, we hope to see both of you at the Energy Conference later this year as well.
Oh yes, I enjoyed the last one enormously, and I loved meeting the young people who were there. I thought
yes,
that
and
was.
I hope that we'll have plenty more by November. Dame Fiona, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. It's been absolutely terrific. I know that the members were many of them are really looking forward to the interview anyway, and I have no doubt that we will have many people looking at this when it goes to market in the fuelers world over the next couple of weeks.
Well, I can't tell you how flattered I was to be asked amongst all the people we've had so far. I thought, me? Really?
Of course. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to seeing you hopefully before not too long.
Indeed. Thank you.